This presentation is just a continuation of the second half of the introduction to biodesign. So a project portfolio is just a collection of several different projects within an organization, and it's important that these projects inside the portfolio are aligned with the strategic goals of the organization. And at an even higher level, the strategic goals should be tied to the overall organizational mission statement. And the mission statement is really stating the purpose for why a company, a school, university exists to begin with. And it states why you exist as an organization. And that's what's shown on the left. And this is a situation where there's going to be a lot more success in completion of the projects in terms of time, budget, and quality. On the right side, there's a poorly integrated system, and people working on the different projects in a portfolio really don't know why they're working on the specific project. There's no central theme tying them together, and their purpose is not really clear. If that happens, people won't know the strategic goals as well. And if these things aren't aligned to the overall purpose of the organization's probably going to take up a lot of projects that turn out to be unsuccessful because people lack motivation when they don't know the purpose behind what they're doing. Projects are becoming more commonplace in all types of jobs nowadays for three main reasons, and those being increased global competition. There's a lot more outside pressure for people to keep up with each other. Another factor is pressure to adopt rapidly evolving technologies. Technology is always changing, and there's always a need to start new projects and complete them quickly nowadays. The last factor is being there's shorter product life cycle. With more pressure to rapidly evolve technologies, the product cycles are expected to be less, which means higher frequency of projects being undertaken by each of the organizations. There's two main approaches to how tasks are accomplished within a project. The first one is a waterfall approach, where each of the tasks start and stop after each other, before or after each other. There's no overlap where two tasks are being worked on in parallel at the same time. And this spreads out the effort that is required throughout a project and actually makes it a little bit longer to complete, takes a little bit longer to complete these projects. In the second type, the concurrent approach, tasks are performed in parallel with each other. You might have multiple tasks being worked on by the same people or different people, and the project life cycle will probably be shorter than the waterfall approach, but the trade-off here is that with the concurrent approach, there's going to be more effort required of the team members when things are being done in parallel together. So there's a trade-off. With the waterfall approach, the effort distribution is more broad, and with the concurrent approach, you'll have shorter life cycle, but there will be more effort requirements within that shorter time. In the Medical Technology Innovation and Design class taught here at NC State University, there's really four main components of the class. It's I guess a 6-month long class if you take all the modules of it, and during those 6 months these four parts are completed by each of the teams. And what they do is they use a combination of waterfall and the concurrent approach to completing project tasks. The first one is the identification phase and the needs assessment phase, and teams will go out into hospitals not knowing what they're going to work on at first and try to identify problems and needs caused by those problems and design new and innovative technologies. In the second phase, the ideation concept development, they'll try to brainstorm and get ideas and then verify whether or not those ideas are actually feasible and actually do they solve the need statement, or do they help address that need statement. And in the third stage, innovation and design, you'll start to prototype things, doing product specifications and testing, and you'll actually try to develop the product. And in the fourth stage, the last stage, you want to actually implement what you're doing and see if your prototype is successful or not, and actually let people test it out in either the clinical setting and actually see whether or not you've come up with something that helps address the problem. So this is the overall schedule of the Medical Technology Innovation and Design course, and I'm going to try to highlight both the waterfall approach and the concurrent approach that's used for this class. You start off with the identification stage at the beginning with strategic focus, observation, and problem identification, and there's other parts. And when you get to disease state fundamentals, when you're trying to understand the definitions of the problems that you're looking at the same time, you're going to want to look ahead at the market analysis and see if there's a large enough market to go after this problem. Is it worthwhile in terms of a business sense? And so at the same time that you're doing the identification stage, you'll be doing components of the ideation stage. So in the ideation stage, you might be doing a needs filtering process, and to do that, you might be cutting down your need statements and the problems that you're going after in terms of the regulation that's involved in the project and whether or not it's a project that has reimbursement potential. With the innovation stage, you might be doing your final concept selection, but when you're coming up with new ideas in the brainstorming session, you want to make sure that these ideas are not only addressing the need statement, but the strategic focus at the highest level of your team, the first thing that you come up with as a team. And these are all just examples of things that you're going to be doing concurrently. You're going to be reaching ahead. Sometimes you're going to be reaching back to different parts of the project to verify and recenter your focus as a team and make sure that you stay on the right track. And you don't want your scope of your project to get outside of what your strategic focus is at any time. And that could cause a lot of problems when you have scope creeping and getting bigger and bigger throughout a project and you can't get a handle on all the things that you have to do. At other parts of the project, when you're doing implementation, you're probably not going to reach back as much to the earlier stage in terms of maybe needs filtering and things like that, because by that time in the project, you'll already have gotten through that and you won't need to go and look back at it again. And so that a lot of the steps in the last stage are held off and they're not done really necessarily in parallel with other tasks earlier in the project. Here's an example project schedule from a senior design team in the Biomedical Engineering department at NC State. And what this is showing here, on the left, they have all the tasks and meetings that they went to and the dates, the durations. And on the right, they have the visualization of those in terms of the calendar days that either the meetings occurred on or when certain papers were being written for the project and so on. It just shows the durations and the timing of specific official events for the team. And what this is showing is that some of these events are interrelated to each other. One event might depend on another event in the schedule occurring before or after or even during the same time. So the schedule shows some elements, most of these elements occurring in parallel where there's overlap in terms of when these projects are being done. And there are other parts in the project towards the bottom that really are done after the first steps are taken and completed by the team. So it's a combination of both waterfall and the parallel concurrent project scheduling approach. So some key project success factors, what will help you get a project going in a very successful manner. You want to have a clear and shared purpose and goals, and that begins on the first day when you get your team, when you make your mission statement. And you won't have a lot of motivation with your team and other stakeholders if team members and people outside your team don't know why you even exist to begin with. So it's clear that you know what you're doing at all times, you understand your purpose and your contribution to accomplishing that purpose, and that other people can see it as well when they're dealing with you. There won't be confusion, and it helps get a lot of positive energy and motivate people in a successful way. Most importantly, you want to have unfailing customer orientation, and that's all done with this needs assessment process that you really undergo as a senior in the biodesign process. And you always want to maintain close contact and understand what your customers are asking you or revealing to you through interviews, and you always have to make sure that you're really sticking close to the requirements that are revealed through your interactions with the customers. You also want to make sure that you have adequate support and resources. So sometimes you might have to pause and wait so you can acquire more resources where you can have more manpower or time to work on a specific part of a project. So it's important to understand the available resources that you have at any given time in a project. Sometimes you'll have to accelerate that or slow down depending on the availability of the resources. It's important to have clear roles and responsibilities on your team. Just makes things a lot more efficient And it helps decisions get made too in the meetings for your team. It might be kind of boring to sit down and plan out all the steps you're going to take, all the meetings and stuff before you can actually start doing other stuff. But it's important to actually spend the time and set a good plan together as a team before you go out there and work out in the field. You'll see there's a trade-off. You're going to be spending more time planning, but in the end, it's going to be probably more efficient once you get that past that part, because there won't be any confusion about what people need to be doing once the ball gets rolling and you're actually accomplishing the tasks in the project. It's also important to have an understanding of where there might be a lot of project uncertainty in the future. You might have an idea or where you might reach possible tricky situations in the project where you're not really sure what's going to happen, or there might be success or failure, and you really don't know how likely you are to get to the next level. But it's important to understand where there is a part of uncertainty in a project, and also be able to have backup plans to address that uncertainty when it arises. You want to have continuous effective communication, definitely amongst your team and your team leaders, and also amongst all the stakeholders that are involved with your project. Effective scope management and change control is also really important. You always want to be able to make sure that you understand the purpose of why you're doing it, and that it's aligned with the goals of the team and the project. You don't want to waste time doing stuff that falls outside of the scope of the project. And it's also very important to have good leadership on your team. When you get a new team assembled, there might not necessarily be an established leader at the time, but it doesn't take long usually for that person to emerge as the team leader. And it's always good to have at least one or two people on the team designated as communication leaders, leaders of meetings. There can be multiple leaders for different portions of the project, or there can be one single leader who tries to take control over all, the entire dealings of the team. There's different methods that work better for different teams. It's up to that team to decide what works better, but it's always good to have some form of leadership in place. So the most important part in the biodesign process is probably the unfailing customer orientation. And you want to carefully manage the expectations of the customers and other key stakeholders to help keep the scope of the project to something that's reasonable. You want to keep your tasks to stuff that you are able to efficiently and effectively accomplish. You don't want it to be doing too much stuff at any given time. This is done by frequent communication with all of the stakeholders. The more frequent, the more updated those people will be when you're going into meetings and when you're emailing them. And it will be just more, you'll have more rapid progression in your project when you're having to go back and talk to people you haven't interviewed in person in a long time. If you've been emailing them between the last two times you've sat down. A stakeholder is anyone who will be affected by the project or who can influence the project's success or failure. That could be the surgeon, the patients, the nurses, the therapists, people reimbursing a device, people investing in the device, FDA regulating the release of the device, your team members, family members of patients. These are all stakeholders because they are somehow directly or indirectly affected by the project or who can influence the project's success or failure. So once you have your team for the first time, you want to sit down and develop a plan for this strategic focus. And this is at a stage in a project before you even really know what the project's going to be dealing with particularly. This could be at the beginning of a company or the beginning of a project within a company. And basically, it's going to start off with this personal inventory. There's three main items. You have a mission statement, you have strengths and weaknesses of all the team members, and you have acceptance criteria, which is a list of criteria that you used to determine which projects are undertaken by the team or the organization. And these three components all add up to a strategic focus, which is really kind of like a compass to help guide a team through the process of filtering what projects they choose to do and which projects they choose not to do. So to have good project alignment, all the project participants must agree on the purpose or the mission of the project. They want to know why we're doing this, and if we accomplish it successfully, how do we even know that we've done it well? We need to be able to measure whether or not a project has succeeded or failed. You want to know clear, shared, and challenging but realistic goals. And you want to make sure that These goals are clearly conveyed to not only the team, but possibly some other key stakeholders to the project. And these goals have a powerful influence on individual and overall team performance. So the first part of developing a strategic focus plan as a team is to develop a mission statement. And what a mission statement is a concise sentence or paragraph or collection of sentences that really states why you even exist as a team or an organization, and what are you trying to achieve. And it's really the highest level description of who you are, and it's really important to have a good mission statement, because everything you do after that mission statement is created is based on that mission statement, or it should be. Some examples here from pretty famous companies out there are this one from Coca-Cola. They just have a few brief sentences for their mission statement: to refresh the world, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness, to create value and make a difference. It's pretty high level. It's not very specific, but everything that they do should be tied to what this mission statement says here. And for Nike, their mission statement is something like, our mission is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. If you have a body, you are an athlete. So looking at these examples, even the biggest corporations from these examples, all of their products and all their projects can be tied to just these very concise points of emphasis stated in their mission statements, which are pretty short but cover a lot of what they do. This is the mission statement from the largest medical device maker, which is Medtronic, and their mission statement's in more of a paragraph form. It's more specific, and it covers different things that really can't be easily said in one or two short sentences. But it just shows you that big companies can either have small or pretty long and specific mission statements. Once you've created a mission statement as a team or within a company, you want to assess your strengths and weaknesses amongst the team members. And to do this early in the project, before the project even starts, you want to have every person on the team go off individually and chart or write down their strengths and their weaknesses. And then you want to have a meeting maybe a week later and actually bring those together and combine those into a strengths, weaknesses, interests, and dislike chart, which combines either similarities amongst the people, different points brought up by a lot of people, or you can choose to include everyone's strengths that they wrote down, everyone's weaknesses, everyone's interests, and everyone's dislikes. There's different ways of doing that. But this is an example from a medical device project within the MedTech Innovation and Design course. And it just shows you, it gives you a good idea of how people work without even really knowing them yet, what their interests are. You get to know people at a more personal level. This is another example from the Medical Technology Innovation and Design course. And the last part of forming a strategic focus is developing a list of acceptance criteria, which is a list of factors that are used to determine which projects you undertake as a team. And some examples of acceptance criteria are: you look at the market growth. You make a list of different growth rates, and you choose your project based on whether or not the market is growing at a fast enough rate. With market dynamics and competition, maybe you say, we only want to choose a project that has this many competitors or is more of a stable market. Or maybe we want to find a market that there's not really many competitors at all. Sometimes you want to use that strengths, weaknesses, and interests and dislike chart to really see what skills that you have a lot of core competency in and what you really lack skill in. And you just can have a list of your skills be part of your acceptance criteria, saying this we'll only undertake this project if it has a lot of electronics in it, or a lot of mechanical or biomedical related parts to it. Another part is the potential effect on health outcomes. you can say we only want to work on a medical device project if it has the potential to affect so many millions of people, or thousands of people, or hundreds of people. It really defines the scale of the problem that you're trying to address. And you'll have to set a threshold as a team to what meets that acceptance criteria and can go on and be taken on as a project. Time required to achieve results. If you're only working on a short class project with a few weeks, you only want to take a project that can be done in a few weeks. You don't want to take a 9-month project when you only have 2 weeks to do it. So for this project in the BME 352 class, it's a project that has a short time frame, and so really these acceptance criteria don't really apply to you now, but next year you're going to have to be looking at whether or not your project that you choose is actually doable within the year-long time that you have to work on it as seniors. And then one of the other things is, do you have the resources required to achieve the results? You want to make sure that you have the journal articles, access, 3D prototyping, the access to people to interview. You only want to choose projects where you know you'll have the tools available when you need them later on to actually get the project done. Another part is the revenues, the market size, and the targets. You might say we only want to work on a project that has a $500 million total addressable market per year, and so we won't choose projects that only take in $200 million per year. And so you'll set a threshold level that determines whether or not this potential project can actually be done by the team and is actually interesting to the team. And these are all different examples of acceptance criteria, and really it just defines a filter that you send in all these potential projects into, where only a few potential projects reach the other end, and then you actually have to narrow it down again. And so you might have to develop more and more acceptance criteria to keep cutting down the potential projects until you really realize that there's only one project that you really feel you can do very successful on based on all those factors.